Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Louise, Curator of Natural History at the High Desert Museum. Thank you for attending this evening's Natural History Pub. I'm going to begin by acknowledging that the High Desert Museum is on Indigenous land. This is the ancestral and contemporary homeland of the Warm Springs, Klamath, Nez Perce, Northern Paiute, Umatilla, Wasco, and Yakima people. This acknowledgement is important to me for two main reasons. First, I want to honor the ancestral and ongoing relationship between the land, plants, and animals and people who are indigenous to this place. Second, I want to recognize the sovereignty of the hundreds of Indian tribes and nations that exist today within the United States, and to recognize that many of their citizens live here today. Thanks, as always, to our very loyal museum members for helping to make this event possible. We would also like to thank our sponsor, Fairfield Inn and Suites, for their ongoing support. And without further ado, I am absolutely delighted this evening to introduce Ron Reed and Kari Marie Norgaard. Ron Reed is a traditional Karuk dipnet fisherman, spiritual leader, and important public figure for the Karuk Tribe. Ron Reed comes from a long and prominent family of traditional spiritual leaders and cultural practitioners. He is the father of 6 children. In his capacity as the Karuk Tribe's cultural biologist, Ron has been an important tribal spokesperson who has communicated the cultural and health impacts of current river and forest mismanagement to audiences around the world. He works at home to restore Karuk culture and tribe through reconnecting people, especially tribal youth, to the natural world. His work has been featured in prominent news outlets, including National Geographic, National Public Radio, High Country News, and many, many more. Mr. Reed is a co-founder of the Karuk UC Berkeley Collaborative and has served as a member of the Forest Research Advisory Committee of the USDA, which reports directly to the Secretary of Agriculture, a member of the Environmental Justice Task Force for the California Environmental Protection Agency, and was one of half a dozen delegates from California to the first US Social Forum in Atlanta. Dr. Kari Marie Norgaard is a professor of sociology and environmental studies at the University of Oregon. She served as a consultant for the Karuk Tribe since 2003 and chaired the environmental sociology section of the American Sociological Association from 2018 to 2019. Norgaard is the author of Living in Denial, Climate Change, Emotions, and Everyday Life, and most recently, and I highly recommend this book to all of you, Salmon and Acorns Feed Our People, Colonialism, Nature, and Social Action, and dozens of other articles. Dr. Norgaard has received the Fred Patel Distinguished Contribution Award, Environmental Sociology section of American Sociological Association, and the Pacific Sociological Association's Distinguished Practice Award. Ron and Kari have been working closely together since 2003, conducting policy-relevant research on tribal health and social impacts of environmental decline. In 2004, their report, The Effects of Altered Diet on the Karuk Tribe, was submitted to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission as part of the opposition to the relicensing of the Klamath River dams. Their action represented the first time a tribe has ever claimed that a dam had given their people an artificially high rate of diabetes and other diet-related diseases. Since that time, Ron and Kari have continued to work on policy-driven research projects, including work that established tribal cultural and tribal subsistence beneficial uses in the TMDL water quality process in California for the first time. Together, they have co-authored multiple articles and book chapters and co-supervised over a dozen undergraduate theses. In 2019, their article, Emotional Impacts of Environmental Decline: What Can Attention to Native Cosmologies Teach Sociology About Emotions and Environmental Justice, received the Best Article Award from the Sociology of Emotions section of the American Sociological Association. I want to give a very warm welcome to you both, Ron and Kari, and thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Okay, I think, yeah, it's really an honor to be here, and we're just thrilled that, you know, to get to share the work that we've been doing for quite a big portion of our lives, and work that's really impacted, you know, not only each of our lives, but our families and, you know, many, many, many people around us. So it's, I don't remember the exact moment we met, but I remember pretty close in there. And it's been, yeah, the 3 generations of my family's life have been changed from the work we've been doing. So I really appreciate the opportunity to share it. And, you know, there's all kinds of exciting developments happening in the world now. So so the time is good. I think what we'll start doing though is we're going to open with a little short 2-minute video clip, which is has Ron's mother narrating in Karuk, and shows a little bit of Ron and other people fishing at the falls, at Ishipishi Falls. Did you want to say anything about that, Ron, as I get it up?
Actually, no, but I'm just really thank you very much for having me. Thank you for the very kind words that you gave towards me, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
We dedicate this to the spirit people who walked before us, and to the people who will walk after us. The first spirit people from the center of the world netted the salmon. At Karamin was a spirit man. He made the salmon. He put them in a pool. When they got bigger, he put them in the river to go downriver to the ocean. When they returned, they were caught by a dipnet. They taught us how to fish. That's why we do it this way. The first spirit people gave us the river and the salmon to survive. That's why we, Karuk, are called the river people.
That's what we live for right here. We like to give our fish to the elders. It shows a great amount of respect. Our elders are very important, our babies are very important. And what we do this generation, our generation, is what's going to carry us on.
So let's see. Got a little technology annoyance here. If I can get, there we go. Stop share really fast. Share a different screen. Okay, hopefully you can see that one now. And yeah, just this is, Ron and I have been speaking together and working together for, I guess since about 2003, but this, and we've given, I don't know how many talks together to how many audiences and all around the world. And we've even spoken online before, but we haven't done it online where we have the visuals. So we just try to kind of tell a bit of the story, and thank you for being here and bearing with us. And we'll kind of go back and forth, set this around several different, a series of questions. I'll explain that in a second. And we may sort of tag team, and Ron, if you want to, you can, I'll see you if you raise your hand or anything, then that we can kind of work together that way. Why is my cursor not working now? Oh, great. Okay, let's see. So, okay, I gotta go down here. So this is Karuk Territory in yellow there, just enters a little bit into Oregon in the middle of the Klamath River. I'll let Ron say some things more introductory about things, but just to give you the map there. And then we've been working together on, as Louise kindly said in her introduction, on a whole variety of different projects for quite some time now. On the right there is folks measuring freshwater mussels with Confederate Tribes of Umatilla, Dave Wolf there. And in the photo on the left, you see Ron's wife, Robin, a talk we did at Berkeley a year or two ago, and then we've been working together for a while on a wide variety of different projects. And so I thought, kind of in the trying to find the flow of how to do this on Zoom when we're all in different places, centering what we'll talk about today for you, and based on what a sense is of what Louise and the museum was interested in, these 4 questions, which really come out of our work. And Ron will take the lead on these, but we'll sort of tag team in terms of how they relate to the work we've done. But what is Karuk Social Management, which is a term that I heard you first say in your backyard, and since been using and appreciating as a sociologist. How Karuk people take care of the land? What does fire mean to you? How can Indigenous and Western sciences work together? And then how can climate change be a strategic opportunity? So you'll just need to say, I mean, I'll just try to tag off of you in terms of moving to the next slide or things like that. Yeah, this are just kind of move with some of our thoughts. So yeah. Thank you. And thanks everyone for bearing with us in this really different format.
Kari, thank you very much for this introduction. And I think right there is a picture of social management. That's Ishipishi Falls. That's intergenerational teachings right there at its best. And, you know, we take care of the land, but we also take care of our family. And that's the most important thing of our ceremonies and our religious sense of well-being is family. And what is Karuk Social Management? Well, how do we take care of the land? It's the same answer, fire. Cultural burns. Cultural fire is nurturing physically and mentally. Physically, it provides food. It erases disease off the earth. And mentally, it provides for intergenerational knowledge that's transmitted and handed down. That's going on for thousands of years, generation after generation. Fire is our teacher. Fire is a healer. It's the basis of our cultural awareness. It gives us a degree of social consciousness, and that is Karuk Social Management. And fire right here is the thing that we are disallowed to do. And as tribal managers, as original stewards of the forest, we all know stereotypically that we are harvesters of the natural resources of this world. But what isn't known is that we have a right to those resources after we manage. And if fire is our main management tool, and that we're not able to utilize that forest management tool proactively, then we are not managing the landscape properly. And it's more of an extraction-based land management practice rather than reciprocity based on diversity and harmony. So, you know, those are some things that we have no control over right now. We have to, you know, so it's important for our people to go to school and learn the ways of Western science so we can actually integrate traditional knowledge and indigenous science. Right here is a picture of a very close dear friend of mine, Asia Conrad, and she has done just that. She lives right across the street from me, and she has earned her degree at Berkeley and then her master's out of Oregon. So that is a tremendous feat in her own. So, and she's coming back and bringing back to the community the things, much like a salmon would bring back to the ocean, be bringing back knowledge so we can learn how to evolve over time. So that's just, that's something you would think that is everyday magic, but it isn't. And that's probably private property, private land holdings to be able to do those type of things, to do it through the Forest Service, which is part of the prescribed management pilot project, a national pilot project, I should say, that's happening. So I should take that back. That might be a national pilot project there, but usually as far as tribal membership, if you don't own land, which a lot of us don't, then you are prohibited to manage it with the use of fire.
So here I just have a variety of different things. So one of the, just going back and forth on some of this, but certainly Karuk people using fire for a long time. This is Kathy McCovey on the left, burning bear grass and then holding up a bear grass skirt that she made.
Amazing. And fire is so important to our culture. Something like 90% of our cultural resource species need fire to propagate. So fire is very instrumental.
One of the things that we talked about and Luis read about in the book is the relationship between how fire suppression has happened. And this is an excerpt from a letter sent from just 8 miles down the road from where Ron lives, the Forest Service, the local Forest Service district ranger to the district office from Orleans in 1918.
Yeah, that's just, the only sure way is to kill them off. That's the forced assimilation that the world, as I see it, doesn't know about. This isn't being taught in the K through 12 curriculum. It's not being even taught in college unless it's interdisciplinary. This is a core subject matter, because we know about Black Lives Matter. We know colonialism and all these things, but do we actually know the story of the Native Americans?
I'll say, for me, since we've been working together, it is incredibly eye-opening. I grew up in Berkeley, California, in probably one of the most progressive schools, public schools in the country, I would imagine, just 5 hours away from where Ron is now. And I had no idea that so many people were using fire for one thing. I knew nothing about this, but that so many people were living in traditional ways and doing all the activities that they were. And similarly, that it was a matter of such urgency. So here, I think this quote is particularly powerful in terms of the relationship of fire suppression and colonial violence and the suppression of culture as well. And so this was just sort of a particular, it's kind of a long quote. I've tried to avoid doing long quotes on these slides, and we're kind of trying to tag team, but there has been a renewed interest in Indigenous burning. The fact that the two of us get invited to speak pretty regularly is a testament to that. And Ron has a piece in National Geographic coming up probably this week. So there's been a lot of interest in Indigenous burning, and Karuk have been at the forefront of a lot of that knowledge sharing and outreach and willingness to talk about their experiences and share knowledge. Okay, so the third question I had was just how can Western and Indigenous sciences work together? And here I had some of the slides of some of our work, but I don't know if you want to say anything.
Yeah, that looks like my home. Looks like my home creek, Tea Creek, but I might be wrong. I think it's Tea Creek right there. And how can Western and Indigenous sciences work together? To me, it's necessary. Traditional knowledge, Indigenous science, we practice enhance, preserve, and maintain. That's how we manage our landscape. Western science is more of an impact oriented. They use numbers and they use, so to me, they're quite the opposite type of sciences, but together, I think we can build a program that meets all the needs of the different communities, the different research agencies, and key stewards of the basin. Because without that, you know, we're all having a pendulum type management. One side wins, the other side loses, and it just kind of keeps going back and forth. So we got to win together and we have to lose together. And so if we can, but I believe that we have it wrong right now. Instead of Western science going out and leading the way and then interjecting Indigenous science as we go, it needs to be the other way around. We are place-based managers. We have a place-based religion. We have place-based communities, and we know how to manage this land. So if you have somebody else out of the region coming in and trying to manage with a whole different set of management philosophies, we get in trouble. Hence the problem we have with fire suppression today.
And I'll say we'll sort of share some particulars of how this played out, because I think really our relationship has been built on kind of these combinations of Western and Indigenous science.
Yes.
But I will say that my career has incredibly benefited from this combination, from understanding the kind of the holistic approach, the ways that things are very connected. And specifically in the report that we did, which we first started working on in 03, 04, which was, as I said, the first time a tribe had filed that in a dam, in a FERC process, that they were dam was giving them artificially high rates of diabetes. That could never have happened if it hadn't been for kind of the strengths of each of the frameworks that each of us brought. And I think that'll be evident as we go through. So that work, again, this was the title of the report, and the effects of altered diet on the health of Karuk people. And this is when we first met, and you started describing what was happening in the community.
But I would just say that commodities is something that I didn't even grow up with. That's how old I am, is pre-commodities. And so that's what I tell my children. They used to complain about commodities. I say, well, we didn't even have commodities growing up. Well, what'd you have? Yeah, that's right. We didn't have much, you know. So what that really does, that really creates a level of understanding of what we're forced to eat now because of poverty, because of the situation that it seems like riverine communities are in today. We're forced to eat those type of foods if you don't have the abilities to go out and travel 2 hours away for the local supermarket. Other than that, we're basically shopping at liquor stores and such. And then on the other side of that, salmon. We need salmon. You know, I'd rather have that pink salmon right there in that can than I would a big old fresh steak, because of the nutrient value. But over here, looking at that salmon, there's no salmon in that net. And that's much like the fishery has been for the last 4 years. We've caught less than 150 fish in the last 4 years. So you don't need to be a mathematician to figure out that, you know what, the effects of altered diet is still happening today. And not only that, because of the lack of fish, a lot of that, again, that mental stress. We're just like fish with, you know, with the lack of dissolved oxygen or with warm water. That's just another stressor on our community.
So I'll sort of walk us through a little bit. As people may know, there's been some wonderful developments in this project that I don't know what year you first started working on it. I think you've been working on it for several years by the time we met in 03. But the dams are supposed to be operated in the public interest. And so just like the airwaves or other things, so the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission gives licenses for dams, and they need to be need to show those licenses expire, and then they need to do a whole bunch of studies and show whether that dam is indeed still in the public interest. And that's what the process that Ron had been involved with. I'll let you speak more to this picture.
Yeah. I'll just say that I was involved with dam relicensing for about approximately 10 years, a couple years before 2001, a couple years after 2006. 2001 to 2006, I was a formal Karuk Tribe representative in the first hydroelectric licensing of the Klamath River. And I went to those meetings from 2001 to 2006. I went to those meetings 1 week, every month for 5 years. And at the end of those 5 years in the final license application, in that big old stack of books that my friend, the late Ronnie Pierce, is standing by, they mentioned no significant impacts to the cultural resources of the Karuk Tribe. And that was like a disheartening point in time for me, because I laid it out there for 5 years, and it had a huge impact on my family, being away from my family that long. I mean, that was one set of meetings that I went through, and I was gone practically all the time, going to dam relicensing meetings. And so it had a huge impact, on our family. But at the same time, a lot of relationships were built. A lot of people were lost. And, so we keep on pushing on with the hopes of those dams coming out shortly.
So this really is, in terms of this blending of Western Indigenous science, because that's what we ended up doing after the really egregious lack of engagement and lack of respect for Ron's Indigenous science and Indigenous knowledge. But when the two of us did start tag teaming together and looked at, I just cut pretty brief here, but certainly the extent of the altered diet, because those dams have no fish ladders and the spring run is entirely cut off. And then we looked, and I didn't put any of the data in here, although I could pull it up if we needed it in the Q&A. But the rates of diabetes, when diabetes and other heart diet-related diseases first started showing up in families, and very much correlated with the loss of salmon in people's diet. And that work made it onto the front page of the Washington Post in, looks like 05, early 05. And really had a big impact and was taken quite seriously. And has been used in the various, there's another, I guess there'll be another more NEPA projects happening after that. But one of the things I'll just say about that I feel like I learned, although I was the one that was compiling it and looking at the data and those kinds of things, it was really clear that, and when I first started the project, I thought, well, surely this seems really straightforward. Surely other tribes have done this, and nobody had. Other tribes had talked about, there was all kinds of work, of course, about the importance of traditional foods and health. And then there were tribes that were facing contaminants, that were looking also at, the loss of, all of the mental health and the many, many layers of this, but nobody had linked it to a dam and sort of the disappearance of a salmon run. And the way that people's diets in a very short time period were really drastically altered. So there's a lot of things that came out of it. But for me, as a Western trained scientist, it was so valuable that Ron was there making the connection. So that was the health, the physical health, and the mental health are all connected, and the people dying too young, and all of the parts of the system of Karuk social management that he mentioned at the beginning, where things are very interconnected in Indigenous frameworks. It allowed me to understand and think about what relationships should be looked at, how I should set up research questions, all of these kinds of things. So we've continued to go on. I didn't put up a lot more of what we've done together, but we've co-authored a number of research articles and supervised many student theses, and always sort of using that blending of Indigenous science and Western science. Okay, last question.
Okay. How can climate change be a strategic opportunity? I think Kari just kind of mentioned, there's a perfect segue, because, I believe that Indigenous science around the world have a lot of answers, and I know a lot of people know that. And it's this time systemic racism has come to the forefront. Fire suppression has come to a forefront. The pandemic has come to a forefront. And it's all these different things that are all intermixed. And Western science and Indigenous science now, much like the smoke right there we're looking at, is mixing. I mean, it needs to mix because we know how to take care of this landscape. Let's not fool anybody. Let's look through the past lies that's been distinguished on Native Americans. You know, we have a way about us that we're interconnected with this landscape, believe it or not. And it's in our DNA to take care of this landscape. It's in our DNA to take care of the relationship of that landscape that provides life to human beings and that provides life throughout the planet. And in order for us to be true managers or true stewards, Western science and Indigenous science have to come together. They have to collaborate. They have to talk to each other. They have to know what is good for the environment and what is bad. And if it's already known, well, let's start figuring it out, because I think it is already known. But the patriarchal society that we live in today, I'm gonna say it, the presidency that we're in, you know, we're under today, and it's not just his fault. I think he's just the messenger of what's actually going on in the political realm of this great nation of ours. So I think we need to pause for a minute and remember that we have a great nation, but then we also have to remember all the inhabitants, all the colors that are in this nation. And the people who have the ability to create positive change, to be proactive, should be the people that are managing. That's how it has always been, and that's how it needs to evolve to again. So fire suppression, fire ecology has to replace that. Fire ecology will cleanse the earth, will make food out of all the different brush piles. Now there's flammable fuels. And long as we're able to be in the scoping of the narrative, designing the narrative, implementing the narrative, and then providing the monitorship, we have to be involved every step of the way. And I think once we do that, it becomes a strategic opportunity to where everybody is in a win-win situation. Because while we're doing that, America can become great once again. America can acknowledge the inhabitants of this great place. America can manage this landscape the way it was before their contact. That's a big push, but that's a push we need. And I think people are ready for that push because of all the catastrophic events that this world is going through today. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on behalf of my people, my culture, my religion, but most of all, my relations. The relations that I develop in the landscape, the relations I develop across the meeting table. Because people across the meeting table often become your extended family. Right, Kari? I want to thank you very much.
That's good. It's pull together, you know, just again trying to sort of tag team and sort of put slides together based on things that you know, that Ron has said over the years or that have really impacted me, and this opportunity to renew relationships and to have stronger relationships. And certainly, you know, the many ways that my life, not only my life individually, but my life, the students, hundreds, probably thousands of students of mine have been impacted incredibly positively because of the relationship between us. I got to officiate the wedding of several students some years ago who would not have gotten married if it wasn't for our relationship as colleagues, right? So, you know, just and I think of the Indigenous wisdom, Karuk wisdom, your wisdom in particular, your medicine of about these relationships and creating relationships. And all of this is also part of the opportunity of the crisis or of the seriousness. So this particular quote that I have up here, I remember I first had started working on this next report with you. I think you were the lead for it when I was doing that for DNR, and about the really importance of in knowledge sovereignty for tribes in the face of climate change. And then you just said that quote, and I of course, many of the times that we're working together, I have a recorder on and I'm recording things that Ron says, and that, you know, this quote about climate change can be an opportunity. And as you said, an opportunity in terms of the awareness of the, you know, the incredible intricacy of Indigenous science and fire science in particular, and also the erasure, but also the opportunity in terms of the networks, as you say, and the friendship and the rebuilding of community. I just have a couple slides I'll go through real quick here, and then we'll just sort of as things that I, again, sort of putting this together without. And so see this, you know, similar to what Ron is saying in terms of opportunities to create community. And also, I think for me as a non-Native person, I am forever moved by the integrity and the sense of responsibility that Ron and everyone in your family and other Karuk people that I've known, the sense of responsibility that they have for taking care of each other and the earth is something that those of us who are non-Native really can feel inspired by and learn from. And it's caused, excuse me to reflect on, you know, what are my responsibilities based on who I am and where I am in the world. I just had two slides that were real specific, and then to climate science, Indigenous climate science. In the bottom is the Karuk climate plan that we've just finished. And there's two images in here which are showing sort of Indigenous perspectives of science that are sort of examples of Indigenous and Western science. The whole plan has a lot of Indigenous and Western science together. But for those of us who, all of us hopefully in our high school textbooks at least, if not elsewhere, have sort of had the idea of a food web. Well, this is a food web that includes a person in it because people are part of this system, because the system won't be there, the species won't be there unless people are there putting fire on the land. And then, and this is the last slide, and then we can move to questions. And this is another document, and both of these drawings were done by one of my graduate students, Kirsten Vignetta. This one's showing the relevance of smoke, how smoke shading can cool the river, and which is of course beneficial for salmon and part of what can trigger salmon migration. And then similarly, Frank Lake is one of the authors on this, along with Aaron David, one of the people who met his wife because of the work that we all have been doing. So I'll just, yeah, Yotva, and you know, thank you also for bearing with. It's a little bit more awkward, you know, to try to tag off each other in a virtual format. And but some of the times I knew I had some of the things on the slides that Ron then did speak about. I just didn't always get the order right. So Ron, thank you for the patience of working with me in this format too.
Oh, this is beautiful. Except for my dogs. One moment.
Yeah, that's good. You can see Ron's baby baskets while he's not there in the background. And just, I don't know what stories go with those particular baskets, but fire is needed to to prepare the weaving materials. So that's a perfect illustration of the importance of fire. So, yeah.
I think one thing, the most important thing, besides, you know, that connect to our fish, I think that that picture really is illustrated the inversion layers that cools down the river for the fish they're able to migrate up the river without dying after it becomes so warm and so polluted. So that inversion layer is really important to the river's ecology and the landscape's ecology. And one thing about fire is food, and food is family. Fire is intricate, is a centerpiece of our religion. We make our medicine, we pray, the fire takes our smoke up to the great creator. Fire burns the landscape, cleans the disease off the earth, makes food and habitat for the creatures that we call our relations. And again, that's the core of Karuk Social Management. It's the healer of the landscape. Fire is awareness. Fire has a direct impact on the ethnosciences, ethnobiology, ethnobotany. And there's a couple of more ethnos that I'm not too sure about. But, very important that, fire is utilized proactively, not reactively. So in other words, the cool cultural burns is integral to a healthy river, healthy landscape, which is a healthy community. It can never be said or overemphasized. The health of the river runs parallel with the health of the Karuk people. Yoto.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we can do questions or.
Yeah, wonderful. And we have a question from Lynn. Hello, Lynn. Thank you for your question. They ask, have you been working with researchers in Oregon universities regarding wildfire?
No, not personally. I mean, I know there's incredibly wonderful climate work being done. But the person that I think, I don't think, unless Ron, have you had contact with the folks at Oregon? I mean, there's some of my colleagues, Kathy Lynn, in the Tribal Climate Change Project and things like that. There are a few people at University of Oregon, but not in terms of like folks at Oregon State. No,
not that I'm aware of.
Yeah. There were folks at Oregon State that were really helpful when we did the Freshwater Mussel Project. That was really significant, but that was almost a decade ago now. I mean, I'm not a fire ecologist. I'm a sociologist who, does work in environmental studies. So my role is, often sort of as a translator or, like putting what are the social contexts of ecological policies and natural resource policy and so forth. And I was one of the co-leads for the tribe's climate adaptation plan. But I'm not involved in their research except for specific projects, I guess I should say. So there are people at Department of Natural Resources who are working on a variety of different projects, but I don't I'm not personally working with anyone at OSU on fire.
Thank you. Well, here we are. Here's another question from Anne Carlisle. Thank you, Anne, for your question. Could you comment, please, on how you feel about logging in combination with fire?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. Any type of management is better than no management. To me, that's what fire suppression is, no management, a lack of management. Wait for a fire to happen and then go put it out. That isn't conducive to a healthy environment. I just lost my train of thought, I'm sorry.
This about logging as pro or con or?
Okay, so logging, when I was growing up, there was logging happen and at least, it provided for the community. So that in one sense is kind of like take care, the happiness and wellness of modern society. You need some kind of income and you need some economic processes going on. But clear-cut logging is outdated. Select logging, I think, is recommended. And I think that logging per se, if done right, is all right. And but clear-cut logging is like the dinosaurs, man. They went extinct. And if you keep on, logging, clear-cut logging, then the impacts on the salmon just keep on getting worse and worse and worse, and pretty soon they will go extinct. So I think there's a right way and a wrong way to do everything. And I believe that logging is a part of management, but it isn't the management.
I can add to that just in terms of what's in the climate plan. And certainly, I mean, just in general, I think that tribes have, all different tribes and different individuals within tribes have such a range of perspectives on anything. But in general, it's been my experience that tribes are not sort of anti-logging in a, or some might be very pro, but in the climate plan, I mean, the Karuk tribe has sued the Forest Service over logging plans, and then also has done logging themselves. So there's, I think similar to what Ron is saying, that there's a variety of ways of doing it. It's not, per se bad. As a sociologist, it's evident to me where there's an economic incentive and how things are organized. So is the money going back, is income going back to the community? Is there an incentive to do things in a way that's going to be healthy for the ecosystem or sustainable long-term? Just a couple of days ago, outside of where I live in Oregon, I went for a hike, and in order to get there, you pass through this just really, the hillsides are just completely clear cut. And as you're doing this, you're driving along these communities of, houses that are falling down, and some of them are occupied, and people don't look like they're doing that well. And it's just kind of a poignant sort of like, yeah, people did have income from this at the time, but it didn't really create wealth in these communities. And yet there can be, we look at when early anthropologists came to Karuk country, they described Karuk people as like amongst the wealthiest in the world. So you can think about having an active management of the landscape should be done in a way to integrate a lot of wealth. As of course, there's all layers and layers of politics around logging as well, though. One of the things that has really increased high severity fires are plantations, and like logging where the has come up all even age, and you can just take one look at that and see that it's totally a fire hazard. And the fires that burned outside of where I live this summer in Oregon, when we had so many fires, were very much happening in plantations. And so it's, there's a lot of different sides to it, I guess, would just say, thinking about, who benefits and who benefits over time, and how does the forest benefit or not.
Thank you both. Warren has a question for you. Have you seen whether research has influenced forest management plans, NEPA analyses, etc.?
I can say that, Ron mentioned there's a really important pilot project happening. When you were talking earlier, first you were starting to say, well, it's hard to burn except on private lands, but there has been this recent development, and the SOMES, I forget the name of it, but the SOMES project, I think is the name of it. The NEPA documents for that are like nothing I've ever seen. I don't think any NEPA documents like this have ever existed before. They are full of Karuk science and knowledge, and it's quite remarkable. And the tribe was very involved, and that came out of long-term collaboration from the get-go on those projects. So there's a lot of proactive work happening. If you look up on the web, the Western Klamath Restoration Partnership, it was very exciting work that the Karuk Tribe, together with some of the local, with the Forest Service and the local watershed councils, is carrying out these projects. So.
Wonderful. Alexa asks, what is the original extent of the Karuk tribal lands? Thank you, Alexa.
That's somewhat controversial, but I'll just say from Witchpeck all the way up to Syad. So that's like about 80 miles of river. And it's a jurisdictional nightmare. It's 2 states, 5 counties, I believe, 3 Forest Service, and I don't know how many water quality entities. I mean, it's just like there's jurisdiction, and it's a jurisdiction nightmare.
Most of, it's been my experience. I don't know how many people listening in know that much about Karuk people, but they're the second largest tribe in California. But because they're, because of the treaties not being ratified and all these things, they don't have a large reservation, and they don't have a lot of the base funding that comes with those kinds of things. So they're, a lot of people don't know that much about them. Most of the ancestral territory, the Forest Service thinks that they manage, or they do manage, but they think that they have jurisdiction.
Marcia asks us to please define NEPA.
NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act, and then anytime a project needs to happen on on public land, you have to go through a review and show that there's not going to be a significant impact. So, or if there is, then it, that it has a benefit. And so anytime there's a larger timber sale or anything like that, or similarly for the dam removal, they're going through, there's been a lot of what's called NEPA documentation, which is where they do lots and lots of research and gather information about all of the different range of impacts. Or if you want to add more to that, Ron, I apologize. I shouldn't have stepped in.
No, I'm fine with that. I'm good.
While we're waiting to see if any other folks have any other questions for you, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind answering one from me. Ron, I've been working on an exhibition on beavers, which opens at the end of January at the museum. And I was wondering if you might have any thoughts on kind of the interplay between beavers, fire and riparian systems and the health of fish.
Yeah. Not so much fire, but I will tackle the beaver and the fish. One of the things, obviously on contact, one of the things that were sought after was the beaver pelts. So a lot of the beaver pelts and a lot of the beaver were extinguished early on after contact. And with that, a lot of the prime fisheries habitat occurred also. I mean, went away as well. And I know that beavers are closely related with the spring salmon and the coho, because they set up these dams on these freshwater creeks, and it backs the water up slow, so you don't have a velocity. It's the habitat that is created is perfect for coho. And so there's a unique relationship with those two species. And when there's no beaver, that's kind of like one of the biggest problems, that we don't have these cold water estuaries, I call them, right? The creek mouths above from the creeks. Before you go out into the warm river, you have if you had beaver ponds in there, you'd have more spring salmon and you'd have more coho available, because that habitat doesn't exist. And so there's a piece of traditional ecological knowledge that is going on in the basin right now, is where they're putting in rearing ponds, and it's modeled after natural rearing ponds up on my creek, up on T-Bar. There used to be, before the 55 flood, there used to be a huge cold water estuary that got blown out in the flood. And there's two creeks right down below, which actually didn't get blown out, and they're fortified. And now they captured their key habitat for the coho during the summer, during the critical times of their year. So what's one of the things we're working up on that creek at T-Bar is reestablishing or mimicking beaver ponds. So that's one important feature that was extinguished by contact, and now it has a definite detrimental impact to the resources that makes our lifestyle available to us.
Thank you.
And beaver are one of the species that are mentioned in the Karuk vulnerability assessment. So there could be something on that website. There's like a one-page thing about beaver, but there might be something about beaver and fire. I don't remember.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question from Russ. Thank you, Russ. They ask, what needs to be done to make dams or hydroelectric projects sustainable? Good question.
Fish passage. That's the reason why those dams are coming out, because they couldn't afford to put the fish around those dams. And I think that we're in a day and age now where systemic racism isn't a part of our way of management. So now it's time to kind of be inclusive, include all the different people that are impacted by federal management projects.
So I'll say too, there was a National Geographic article that quotes Ron and one of his sons, Charlie, is talking about spring Chinook. It mentions the dams. It was maybe 2-3 weeks ago that came out, and I guess there'll be another one that Ron's in and then coming out soon that's on fire. But yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Oh, we have another question from Warren. Will rejoining the Paris Climate Accord have a direct impact on the Karuk policy objectives? Good question. Thank you for that, Warren.
You know, I'm not too sure about how directly that would affect us, but just the feeling that it's put back up there as an important feature of our management landscape is important in itself. So, I mean, I don't know how it hurt us, and I'm not going to know how it's going to help us. So, yeah, Kari?
I mean, I don't know that, I can't think of a specific way it will help. I certainly know that in California, there's discussion of, sharing resources, especially fire-related resources that come out of some of the climate agreements and the funding that's being generated for that towards fire. But I don't know in terms of Paris Climate Accord specifically how it would affect, but for sure, just the general tone. Of course, it can backfire too, since there's people who are really opposed to these things. But in terms of like the immediate issue in the basin, the fact that the states of California and Oregon have just agreed to go on board with being co-partners for dam removal, and that looks like FERC will be approving that. And so right now it's looking like the dams will be coming out in January 2023, which has been an incredibly long process. That, as Ron mentioned, he's been working on that issue. What do you think? Since 2001 or somewhat before then, and other people, many people have been working on that. And there's been a number of agreements made and broken, and things happen. So I think all of us at this point are hopeful, but it'll be good to see it when it happens. But it's definitely been a really huge step, as I understand it, in terms of the latest agreement that was reached.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions. Anyone who has any questions, I'll give you a couple of seconds for you to submit those. Anybody? I want to give you both an opportunity if there's anything you would have liked to have shared this evening that you haven't had an opportunity to, or any final thoughts that you would like to leave us with this evening.
I would just, like to thank you for the opportunity to share, our story. Kari and other, folks like Berkeley, Stanford have been really influential on quantifying Karuk traditional management processes. And without that, I think that's what the design of this process is Western science and Indigenous science. So go to the experts on both sides. Don't go to Western science when you want to talk about Indigenous science, because that's the problem we're in today. So if you want to do Western science, do Western science. If you want to do Indigenous science, do Indigenous science. And by all means, if you want to integrate both of those, let's get both leadership to the table so we can finally craft out a solution that fits all. We can't continue on the patriarchal society. We got to bring all peoples of color together, all genders and all walks of life. And I want to thank the High Desert Museum for entertaining this progressive idea, and thank you very much from my family and from the people here on the Klamath River, Yotua.
We're honored to host you, so thank you again for being here this evening and sharing your insights.
Thank you very much.
Kari, did you have any last words?
Oh, I didn't want to speak after Ron, but
That's okay.
you know, I mean, I've said before, like for me, as a non-native person, growing up, you know, not so far away from the Klamath Basin, the work that we've done has just completely changed my life in the best possible ways. As a researcher, as a scholar, you know, last year we won an award for one of the papers that we did, you know, looking at was based on Ron's work on emotions that came out of, you know, the emotional impacts of environmental justice from the dam relicensing, which was one of the things. And, you know, Ron mentioned gender, and, you know, as we were working on the interviews for that as well, he's like, you know, this is incredibly important for masculinity, for how people understand themselves. And it's so many things, so many pieces. You know, there's not a minute goes by that I'm not, and I'm fortunate to have had so many of those minutes that I have been with you, Ron, that hasn't, you know, been just a very rich, often humbling experience. You know, Ron's graciousness, his, you know, because I've been bumbling along many times, and you know, it's my ignorance as a non-native person in terms of the extent of violence and the extent of wisdom and the extent of resilience, so many things. So it's been eye-opening for me, and in just the best possible ways to be. It's been such a privilege to be a part of this work. And like I said, that, you know, the work that's come from our relationship has had all kinds of policy impacts. It's had scientific impacts on the field. It's had impacts on the hundreds and hundreds of students, you know, really thousands of students, that hundreds which have worked with Ron more directly, and thousands that have heard him speak in different come in my classes and things. So I don't start my classes without having you up to talk to my students, and there's a reason for that, because I think it's the starting point of what I still need to understand, or what still I still benefit from learning all of those times. So for those of you that you know, are scientists yourself, I encourage you to you know, to develop relationships, you know, with Indigenous people who are working in the area, who have things alongside. And for all of us, native or non-native alike, there's just so much work to be done together in the world right now. And it's often hard to know how to find what it makes sense to do, what is your place to do, but it's worth just doing your best in any moment, because there's plenty to be done.
And I would just like to thank you, Kari, for your wonderful words. And as you can hear, now you know why and how we have become so successful. I mean, I'm just speaking from the heart, passion for what I know, what I was taught. And Kari has an incredible line of expertise, and she understands, you know, the world in such a way that we're all here for the better of humanity. And, you know, and I couldn't ask for a better research partner, better friend, a better sister, and a better extended relation. And with that, Kari, big love to your family, Sam, and your boy. So we'll leave it there. And I just really appreciate having a wonderful evening. And thank you. Yotwa.
Yotwa. Thank you.
Suinik.
Suinik.
Well, thank you all again for joining us here tonight in this virtual space. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.